Welcome back. Oop. Hi, welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager at the Pacific Beach Library. Thank you for joining me for day 9 of our read along together of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Today, we're actually going to read the conclusion of the book. And then starting next week, we will be reading The Cricket on the Hearth, which is in another of Charles Dickens' Christmas books. As I mentioned before, he wrote 5 different Christmas books. And then after that, he wrote short stories each year to mark the holiday. And so we are reading together right now his first and most famous of the Christmas books that he wrote. And then starting next week, we'll be reading, as I mentioned, The Cricket on the Hearth, which is the third of the 5 books that he wrote just on the Christmas theme, publishing each December. All right, so let's see. Let's start with some tea. I had planned on having the same Christmas tea I had before, but then today I saw a different tea in our break room. Oh, it's so exciting to find different teas hiding in the cupboard in the break room. This one is called Peppermint Bark. It's a cool winter herb tea from the Republic of Tea. It's green rooibos with organic peppermint, vanilla, and cocoa. I thought I'd do a reading today from the canister because this actually was really cute. So they were saying this, think of this as a winter respite tea. Fill your home with the aromas of peppermint and chocolate with this sweet herbal tea. Organic green rooibos mingles with the flavors of organic cocoa and peppermint. Savor this caffeine-free cup by a roaring fire after a big holiday meal to settle the tummy and satisfy your sweet tooth. Well, that sounds absolutely perfect for today. We haven't had a holiday meal, but as you probably have guessed from my conversation earlier this week, I have had many holiday cookies. Yay, holiday cookies. And so this is perfect to also settle my tea with the figurative fire. At least we have the comfortable library around us. I do love the scent of the chocolatey peppermint, the minty chocolate flavor. Hello. Oh, so good. This really would be great with Christmas cookies. But again, I think everything is great with Christmas cookies. I feel a little like Buddy the Elf with his, like, what was it? The 4 food groups are like sugar, syrup, was it candy corn, cotton candy? I can't remember the other food groups, but obviously very sugary. And this tea would go wonderfully with it. It's not sugared at all, but it just has that coconut peppermint flavor. It just gives it that feeling of sweetness, even though there isn't actual sweetener added to it. I'm going to read one more bit off of the can because today's reading is short. And so, okay, but this one, it had a wonderful poem on the side that said, steep me a cup for a winter's night, for the wind howls loud and the furies fight. Spice it with love and stir it with care, and I'll toast our bright eyes, my sweetheart fair. That's a short little poem by Minna Thomas Antrim, just printed on the side of this little can of tea, but just thought that was lovely. So thank you very much, Republic of Tea, for making not only good tea, but also putting on some poetry for us to enjoy today. Okay, before we talk about yesterday's reading, a little bit more housekeeping. As I mentioned, today we're going to read the conclusion of A Christmas Carol. And then if you would like to join us tomorrow at the same usual tea time and the same usual tea place, tomorrow in our Facebook page at 3 o'clock, instead of doing this live video reading, we're going to open up a Facebook room. It will be my first time actually hosting one of these, so I hope it goes well. I hope we can all get in, but I think that also you should see some sort of link in there saying that there is a Christina's in a Facebook room. Feel free to join in. Everyone in our tea group is able to join in. And so if you'd like to participate, if you have a camera and microphone on your screen, you'll be able to actually talk and be seen by everyone else there. If you don't, I think you should still be able to chat if you want to chat with us so we can interact a little bit. But if you just want to come in and watch, sort of like how you're doing right now, that would also be fun too. But it'll just be fun. I'd love to meet you guys in person, or meet you in person. That would be great. But in the meantime, for now, let's just enjoy meeting each other, seeing each other this way. I would love to get to see you and chat with you tomorrow. And if you have any questions or any topics you'd like to discuss about A Christmas Carol, we could all hash it out together and it'll be fun. So that's what's going on tomorrow. Also, I will start a new poll so that we can start picking out what we would like to read next. We do have about 2 more weeks of reading of A Christmas Carol, or not of Christmas Carol, excuse me, The Cricket on the Hearth. But it's not too soon to start thinking about what we'll read next. And so that'll be the book that we'll start reading in January. We're actually going to start reading our next thing on January the 11th. I am taking the first week off in January, a couple family things going on. And so I will see you back on 1/1/1/21, and we'll start our next book then. But we can start voting on it today. So let's do that. Let's see. I think, is there any other housekeeping? Nope, I think that's it. Let's go in and talk about our book. Yay! So, where we left off yesterday was we were talking about the conclusion of Stave 4, entitled The Last of the Spirits, also more formally known as The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. And so, in the first half of Stave 4, which we read on Monday, Scrooge met the phantom, the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and this one was silent. He did not speak. He could not even be fully pictured. He was dark and rather menacing. And he showed Scrooge somebody had died, and that this person had left a life barren, that this person had been so unloved and so uncared for. And it was intimated that the person was uncared for and unloved because this person had not loved others. This person had not cared for others. This person had not been somebody who was kind, and therefore no one cared for him. And so when he died, people whom he had known as business acquaintances did not have genuine sorrow for him. They just mentioned it, they laughed about it, they joked about it, that this person had died, and they didn't care. They talked about how there were, let's see, that there were people who had stolen from this gentleman. Wait, am I getting myself mixed up? Am I talking about yesterday's reading? Yes, there were people who had stolen from him, and that they had taken his, possessions from his home, like as his corpse was there, and that they had sold those items, and that they had said that they were able to do so because this gentleman, the deceased, had passed away alone and had been left alone. No one had watched over his corpse afterwards because he had frightened everyone away from him while he was alive, which profited them, the thieves, afterwards when he was dead. And Scrooge had ended on our passage we read on Monday, basically saying that he sees this example of this unhappy man, and clearly it's an example for him to learn from, that he maybe would be on a path like that, and that he doesn't want to die that way, and therefore he won't live that way, so that he can avoid that future. And he feels bad for that person who died so alone. What we read yesterday was a continuation of the scene where the Scrooge was with the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and they actually take him to the room where that body had died, where there was no bed curtains surrounding it because the charwoman, I think it was, had stolen them and tried to pawn them off. And Scrooge looks and he sees the corpse on the bed covered with a sheet, and he's so close, and the spirit points to him and indicates that Scrooge ought to go look and see who's underneath the sheet, and Scrooge cannot. He says even though he wants to, he knows he could and should, he physically cannot make himself go lift that sheet and see who the corpse is. It's just too much for him, and so he does not do it. He says, too, there must be somebody who feels any sort of emotion rather than just this total lack of caring and regard that somebody has died. He said, is there nobody who feels emotion that this man has died? Show me that person. And basically the spirit takes him to see a man and a woman whose debt had been owned by the deceased, and that the deceased, by his dying, actually made these people happy. They didn't want to feel happy, but their first and true instinct was to feel happy, that the person who had been so merciless and uncaring and unkind to them, that maybe they would have time to raise the money that they owed before the next person came in to claim that debt, and that there was just so little chance that the person who, the new debtor would be as cruel and as the person who had just passed away. Lender, excuse me. And so that is the only example that the spirit can show of somebody who cared about this person who had died. Scrooge then says, because it's been so sorrowful to see how this person died so alone, so uncared for, again, because he had been so uncaring in life, he says, let me see some tenderness connected with a death, or that dark chamber which we just left will be forever present to me. And so he's just saying, is death always like this? Is there ever a time when people can care about a death, when a death would mean something to people, when it would matter, when it would make an impact? And so the ghost conducts them to a different Christmas. And again, the indication is not there as to which Christmas it is, if it's that same or a different, but he says it's the ghost takes him to the home of the Cratchits, where we had been before in Christmas Present. And this time we learn that little tiny Tim has passed away. And he passed away again just just right before Christmas. And so the family's talking about how they're going to they're preparing for his his funeral, that they're going to bury him, that they're going to take him. They would be done long before Sunday when they would bury him. And the family is heartbroken. I mean, they're just genuinely heartbroken. They remember how, they love little Tim, they love their family, and they talk about how maybe things can get better. Maybe someday, things will improve. Bob Cratchit mentions that he had seen the nephew of Ebenezer Scrooge, and that this nephew had commiserated on the death of Tiny Tim, which he had somehow heard about. And that, perhaps this gentleman will help us someday. Perhaps he'll help our elder son Peter to have a better situation. Perhaps they have this hope. And they say too that no matter what, as we get older, as the family grows and moves away from home, I am sure that none of us shall forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting, this first death that was amongst us all. And the family says never. They would never, ever forget Tiny Tim. And so again, the family is mourning, they're sad, but still they're comforted by their sense of love for each other and their love and memory of Tim. And so it's a very sad, touching scene, but it reminds Scrooge that that there is love, and that there can even be comfort and hope in the pain and sorrow such as that, the death of a child. Scrooge finally says, after they leave the scene at the Cratchit home, that he needs to know before they leave, who was it that died? Tell me what man it was whom we saw lying dead. And so the spirit takes him to the past Scrooge's business, and Scrooge looks in the window and he keeps wondering, where am I in all this future? What am I like in this future scene? I don't see myself in my business. I don't see myself around. And the spirit takes him to the cemetery. And Scrooge is reluctant. He's very reluctant. He's scared to see who it would be, because he's starting to wonder if perhaps there's a reason that the spirit has led him here. And the spirit keeps pointing to it and, of course, not saying anything, because he does not speak. And Scrooge asks, before he looks at that headstone, he says, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of the things that may be? And he hopes clearly that if he can change his life, if he can change how he acts in the present, that this might change his future, that this might affect, he already feels changed inside by what he has seen. Can his actions change, and will that change the future course of his life? And he sees then, as the ghost continues to point it out, that he needs to look at that name, and when he reads it, it is his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. The sorrow of learning that he was the man who had lain alone on that bed, who had been abandoned, who had been left, cast aside by society, surrounded only by thieves who wished to profit from him, because really he had only profited by others and never been of a benefit to anyone else. This was his fate. This was his future in store if he continued on his present course. And so Scrooge at this point begs the spirit to please give him a chance to change, because he says, why show me this if I am past all hope? And for the first time, he sees the hand of the spirit, which has been firmly, inexorably pointing constantly at this future ahead of him. It begins to shake and to tremble. And Scrooge realizes that it is a kind hand, that he's showing him this future, but it's so that he does have the chance to make the change. And so Scrooge says, he promises, I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, present, and the future, and the spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. And oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. So he's going to do what he can to live a better life, to be a better person, to be a benefit to society, and to not end up in this sad, sorrowful fate that the spirit of the future yet to come has shown him. Finally, the chapter that we read yesterday ended with the spirit shrinking, altering, and finally seeming to collapse into a bedpost. Now, let's embark upon the last and final stave of A Christmas Carol. We're going to read the entire thing today. Stave 5, quite succinctly, is entitled, The End of It. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees. He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. They are not torn down, cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will be. His hands were busy with his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. I don't know what to do, cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect Laocoon of himself with his stockings. I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello there. Whoop, hello. He had frisked into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. There's the saucepan that the gruel was in, cried Scrooge, starting off again and going round the fireplace. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas Present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Ha ha ha! Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh. The father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. I don't know what day of the month it is, said Scrooge. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind, I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello! Whoop! Hello here! He was checked in his transports by the churches ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clash, hammer. Ding, dong, bell. Bell, dong, ding. Hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold. Cold, piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet, fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. What's today? Cried Scrooge, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes who perhaps had loitered in to look about him. Eh? Returned the boy with all his might of wonder. What's today, my fine fellow? Said Scrooge. Today, replied the boy. Why, Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day, said Scrooge to himself. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow. Hello, returned the boy. Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one, at the corner? Scrooge inquired. I should hope I did, replied the lad. An intelligent boy, said Scrooge. A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one. What? The one as big as me? Returned the boy. What a delightful boy, said Scrooge. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck. It's hanging there now, replied the boy. Is it? Said Scrooge. Go and buy it. Walker, exclaimed the boy. No, no, said Scrooge. I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell him to bring it here, that I may give them the directions where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown." The boy was off like a shot. He must have had a steady hand at a trigger who could have got a shot off half so fast. "I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's," whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. "He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be." The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye. "I shall love it as long as I live," cried Scrooge, patting it with his hand. "I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has in its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hello! Whoop! How are you? Merry Christmas!" It was a turkey. He never could have stood upon his legs, that bird. He would have snapped them short off in a minute, like sticks of sealing wax. "Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town," said Scrooge. "You must have a cab." The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention, even when you don't dance while you are at it. But if he had cut the end of his nose off, he would have put a piece of sticking plaster over it and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself, all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir, and Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest in his ears. He had not gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before, and said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe?" It sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met, but he knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the old gentleman by both his hands, "how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir." "Mr. Scrooge?" "Yes," said Scrooge, "and that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And will you have the goodness—" Here Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Lord bless me!" cried the gentleman, as if his breath were taken away. "My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?" "If you please," said Scrooge, "not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?" "My dear sir," said the other, shaking hands with him, "I don't know what to say to such munificent—" "Don't say anything, please," retorted Scrooge. "Come and see me. Will you come and see me?" "I will," cried the old gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it. "Thank'ee," said Scrooge. "I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you." He went to church and walked about the streets, and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted the children on the head, and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses, and up to the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the girl. Nice girl. Very. Yes, sir.
Where is he, my love? Said Scrooge.
He's in the dining room, sir, along with mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please.
Thank ye. He knows me, said Scrooge, with his hand already on the dining room lock. I'll go in here, my dear.
He turned it gently and sidled his face in round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in great array, for these young housekeepers are always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything is right.
Fred, said Scrooge.
Dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage started! Scrooge had forgotten for the moment about her sitting in the corner with the footstool, or he wouldn't have done it on any account.
Why, bless my soul, cried Fred.
Who's that?
It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let him in. It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late, that was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1/4 past. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
Hello,
growled Scrooge, in his accustomed voice as near as he could feign it.
What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I am very sorry, sir, said Bob. I am behind my time.
You are? Repeated Scrooge. Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir, pleaded Bob, appearing from his tank. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
Now, I'll tell you what, my friend, said Scrooge. I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again. And therefore, I am about to raise your salary.
Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling to the people in the street for help and a straight waistcoat.
A Merry Christmas, Bob, said Scrooge,
with an earnestness that could not be mistaken, as he clapped him on the back.
A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins as to have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards.
And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. The end. That concludes A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So now we all know the secret of keeping Christmas alive in our heart all year long. It's about being kind. It's about looking after others and being a kind of person that, cares about others. And when we care about others, we are a cared for person as well. So that's the lesson for us from A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Thank you very much for reading with me. I see that Pam noticed she looked up Smoking Bishop. I looked it up too, and now I can't remember the details. It is some sort of alcoholic drink. And I remember thinking, because I saw when I was reading one of the things about A Christmas Carol, they mentioned the recipe for Smoking Bishop, and I briefly thought, oh, I should share that recipe. And then I read a little closer, I'm like, wow, that is a lot of alcohol. Well, maybe somebody else would like to drink that. So, I will find the recipe if Pam hasn't already. If you find it earlier, somebody else can post it. But otherwise, I will post the recipe for Smoking Bishop. If anyone would like to have a little Smoking Bishop tomorrow and we gather at 3 o'clock, I will be drinking tea. But y'all can have Smoking Bishop if you want to. You are not at work tomorrow. We're celebrating with a tea party. So thank you very much. Again, if anyone has any things you'd like to discuss about A Christmas Carol, we can do that together tomorrow at 3 o'clock in our Facebook room. Hopefully, let's all keep our fingers crossed that we have a nice Christmas miracle and we're able to get into the room without any technical difficulties. It's probably really easy, but I just worry all the time when we're trying something new. So I'll see you then tomorrow at 3. Thank you very much. And I will also open up the voting for our next read after we complete The Cricket on the Hearth. So thank you very much, and an early Merry Christmas to y'all. Thank you so much for reading A Christmas Carol with me. I very much enjoyed it. Bye.